Chloe Davenport clasped the sapphire necklace around her throat and laughed loud enough for the whole restaurant to hear, telling her friends it was a gift from a man whose wife didn't deserve it anymore. The Tears of the Ocean, a Hastings family heirloom worth $4 million draped around the neck of a 24-year-old who didn't even know its name, and Serena Sterling. She was sitting 3 tables away. She heard every word. She didn't flinch. She simply set down her wine glass, folded her napkin, and smiled the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes, the kind that means war. Before we go any further, if you're watching this right now, drop the name of your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels. And if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button and stay with me until the very end, because what Serena does next is something none of us will forget. The morning it all began, Serena Sterling woke up alone. That wasn't unusual. Richard had been sleeping in the guest suite for 3 months, citing early meetings, late calls, the kind of convenient exhaustion that married people invent when they've already emotionally moved somewhere else. Serena had noticed. Of course she had. But she was a Hastings before she was a Sterling, and Hastings women did not make scenes before they had evidence. She was 51 years old. She had survived a hostile takeover of her grandfather's textile empire at age 32, had restructured 3 failing companies before 40, and had raised 2 children while her husband traveled the world, collecting accolades with her money and her name backing every door he walked through. Serena Sterling did not panic. She prepared. She stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of their Central Park West Penthouse 42nd floor, panoramic view, 12,000 square feet of curated perfection, and she drank her coffee black the way she always had, and she watched the city move below her like a chessboard she'd been studying for years. Her phone buzzed. It was her assistant, Margot. "Mrs. Sterling, I'm so sorry to send this so early, but I thought you needed to see it before anyone else did." Attached was a photograph. Serena set down her coffee cup very carefully. She picked up the phone. She opened the image. Chloe Davenport, 24 years old, daughter of a failed hedge fund manager from Connecticut, recently transplanted to Manhattan with ambitions larger than her accomplishments. She was photographed at Cipriani downtown, laughing at a table full of women Serena recognized from the charity circuit women who absolutely knew whose necklace that was around Chloe's throat. The Tears of the Ocean, $4 million, 7 Colombian sapphires, flawless, surrounded by pave diamonds set in platinum, crafted in 1923 for Serena's great-grandmother Eleanor Hastings as a wedding gift from her husband. It had passed from mother to daughter to daughter to daughter. It was not a piece of jewelry. It was a declaration of bloodline. It was a statement that said, "We have been somebody for a very long time." And it was clasped around the neck of a 24-year-old who was currently laughing with her mouth open at a table full of women who were all quietly taking photographs. Serena stared at that image for exactly 45 seconds. Then she put the phone face down on the marble counter. Then she picked up a different phone, her personal line, the one only 4 people in the world had the number to, and she called her lawyer. "Jonathan," she said when he answered on the second ring, "I need you to pull every joint account, every trust document, every corporate filing that has Richard's name on it. I need it on my desk by noon, and I need you to be quiet about it." Serena. Jonathan Mercer had been her family's attorney for 22 years. He knew her voice the way a doctor knows a patient's pulse. "How bad is it?" "I don't know yet," she said. "That's why I'm calling you first." She hung up. She walked to the master closet. She dressed herself in cream wool trousers, a silk blouse, low heels. She looked exactly as she always looked, composed, expensive, unhurried, as if the world had not just tilted 3 degrees off its axis. Then she went to the safe. The safe was behind a panel in the back of the closet, behind a row of evening gowns. Richard knew it existed. He did not know the combination. That had always been intentional. Serena opened it and found immediately what she already suspected she would find. The velvet box was there. She opened it. Inside, a replica. A very good replica, she would give Richard credit for that, but a replica nonetheless. The weight was wrong. The depth of color was wrong. The mounting had 3 tiny prongs instead of 4. She stood there in the closet with the fake necklace in her hands, and for the first time that morning, she felt something move through her chest. Not rage, not grief, something colder, something that felt like the final clean snap of a decision being made. She put the fake back in the box. She put the box back in the safe. She closed the panel. She went to her desk and began to make a list. Richard came home at 7 that evening looking like a man who had convinced himself he was getting away with something. He was 56, silver-haired, with the kind of easy confidence that comes from decades of walking into rooms where people already knew his name. He'd built Sterling Technologies from a mid-sized software company into a $3 billion enterprise. But Serena knew, and the financial documents Jonathan had sent her that afternoon confirmed that he had done it partly with Hastings' trust money that he had redirected without her knowledge or consent. She was sitting in his living room when he came in, reading, a glass of red wine untouched on the table beside her. "You're home early," he said. "I am," she said. He loosened his tie. He went to the bar and poured himself a scotch. "Good day." "Productive?" she said. She turned a page. He stood there for a moment, scotch in hand, watching her with the particular wariness of a man who can't tell if the water is calm, because everything is fine, or because something is about to pull him under. "I ran into Margaret Chen today," Serena said, not looking up. "She asked about the Crescent Moon Ball, whether we'd be attending." "Of course," he said. "We always attend." She turned another page. She also mentioned she'd seen a beautiful necklace at Cipriani, sapphires, said it looked familiar. The pause that followed lasted exactly 3 seconds. Serena counted them. "I don't know what you're talking about," Richard said. She looked up then. She looked at him very calmly, very directly, the way she looked at opponents across boardroom tables. "Yes, you do," she said. And then she went back to her book. Richard set his scotch down. "Serena." "I'm not doing this tonight, Richard." Her voice was pleasant, conversational. "I'm tired. I'm going to finish this chapter, and then I'm going to have dinner, and then I'm going to sleep. We can talk when I'm ready to talk." He stared at her. "When will that be?" She smiled. It was a beautiful smile, practiced and precise and entirely without warmth. "When I'm ready," she said. He left the room. She listened to his footsteps go down the hall toward the guest suite. She listened to the door close. Then she set down the book. She hadn't actually read a single word since he'd walked in, and she looked out at the city glittering 42 floors below, and she thought very carefully about everything she was going to do next. She called Beatrice Kensington at 8 o'clock. Beatrice was 73 years old, had been married 4 times, and was possibly the most well-connected woman in New York society. She was also Serena's godmother, had known her since she was 7, and was one of perhaps 2 people on earth who Serena trusted completely. "I know," Beatrice said before Serena could say anything. "I've already heard. Half of Manhattan has heard. That girl wore it to Cipriani in the middle of the lunch rush like it was a costume. I assume you've seen the photographs." "I have. And I need your help." There was a pause. Then Beatrice said with the particular satisfaction of a woman who had been waiting for this phone call for a very long time, "Tell me everything," Serena told her. She told her about the fake in the safe. She told her about Jonathan's afternoon of document pulling, which had revealed, among other things, that Richard had quietly transferred $8 million from a subsidiary account into a private fund that had no traceable corporate purpose, which was either embezzlement or tax fraud or both. She told her about the Crescent Moon Ball, which was in 4 days, and which was the single most important social event of the Manhattan calendar, attended by everyone who mattered and photographed extensively by everyone who covered everyone who mattered. "You want to do it at the Gala?" Beatrice said. It was not a question. "I want to do it at the Gala," Serena confirmed. "He'll bring her." "I'm counting on it." Another pause. Serena could hear Beatrice thinking, or rather she could feel it the way you can feel weather changing before it actually changes. "You'll need Antoine," Beatrice said finally, "for the gown. I called him this afternoon. He's flying in from Paris tomorrow morning." Beatrice made a sound that might have been admiration, or might have been amusement with Beatrice. It was often both. "You called Antoine before you called me." "I called Jonathan first." "Of course you did." A beat. "All right, darling. I'm in. What do you need?" I need you to make sure the right people know that I will be attending alone. I need them to be watching when I arrive, and I need someone to make sure that Chloe Davenport is seated as far from the center of the room as possible, ideally somewhere that has the worst possible lighting, and that she is wearing that necklace." Beatrice was quiet for a moment. "You want her to wear the real one. Richard gave it to her. She believes it's real. She'll wear it because she'll want to show it off to exactly the people who will be there. And when the moment is right, I will explain to every person in that room why the necklace around her neck does not belong to her." She paused. "And then I will explain everything else." "Serena." Beatrice's voice had shifted, gone quieter, more careful. "What else is there?" "The finances, Bea. It's not just an affair. He's been stealing from the trust, redirecting Hastings' money into accounts I have no visibility into. Jonathan is still untangling it, but the outline is clear. He was planning to have enough of his own capital hidden away that when he eventually filed for divorce, which I believe he was planning to do, I would have less leverage than I should." Beatrice was silent for a long moment. "That," she said very softly, "is a different level of betrayal entirely." "Yes," Serena said, "it is. Then we're not just protecting your reputation at the gala." "No, we're ending him. Quietly, surgically, in front of everyone who matters. And we're doing it in a way that leaves him no sympathy and no recourse." A pause. Then, "I'll call the seating committee first thing in the morning." Antoine Laurent arrived at 10 the following morning with 2 assistants, 3 garment bags, and the energy of a man who understood that he was being asked to participate in something historical. He was 61 French, perpetually 5 minutes ahead of every trend, while looking as if he had never thought about trends at all. He had dressed Serena for 3 decades. He knew her body, her posture, her preferred fabrics, the way she moved through a room. He also knew, because he had eyes, and because he was Antoine, exactly what this moment called for. "Tell me," he said, setting his coffee down on her dining table without being invited, spreading fabric swatches around him like a general laying out maps. "Tell me what you want her to feel when she sees you." Serena sat across from him. "Irrelevant," she said. "I want her to feel irrelevant." Antoine looked at her steadily. "And him, small," she said. "I want Richard to remember for the rest of his life the moment he understood how badly he miscalculated." Antoine nodded slowly. He picked up a swatch of fabric, a deep black, almost liquid in quality, with the subtle sheen of obsidian. He held it against Serena's collarbone. He tilted his head. He looked at her the way a sculptor looks at marble. "Black, he said. "Not the soft black, not the romantic black. The black that has no apology in it. Yes. And a train. Long, the kind that doesn't hurry. Yes. And the neckline?" He paused. He reached for a different swatch, a deep arterial scarlet. "Here," he said, holding it against the black. "The train. Scarlet, not red. Scarlet. The difference is everything." Serena looked at the 2 fabrics together. Something in her chest settled. "Make it," she said. He smiled. Not a happy smile, a satisfied one. The smile of a craftsman who has been given exactly the right brief. "I will need 3 days. You have 4. Then it will be perfect." He stood gathering swatches, gesturing to his assistants. Then he paused. "The jewelry," he said. "What will you wear?" Serena had already thought about this. "Nothing that competes," she said. "Something that dominates without competing. Platinum, architectural, something that looks like it was made as armor." Antoine raised an eyebrow. "I know someone," he said. "A sculptor, actually, not a jeweler. He makes things that look like they were carved from necessity rather than decoration." He paused. "I'll make a call." "Please do." He left. His assistants followed, carrying the garment bags. The apartment was quiet again. Serena sat at her dining table for a moment, surrounded by the ghost of fabric swatches, and breathed. Then she picked up Jonathan's financial report and went back to work. By Thursday, 2 days before the gala, Jonathan had the full picture. He came in person, which told her it was serious. He was 58, methodical, the kind of attorney who never used a dramatic word when a precise one would do, and when he spread the documents across her dining table, his face looked like a man delivering a terminal diagnosis. The short version, Serena said. Nah. Over 4 years, Richard has redirected approximately $11 million from Hastings' subsidiary accounts into a private holding company registered in Delaware under a name that is not his own, but which we can trace to him through 2 layers of corporate structure. He also borrowed against Sterling Technologies stock without proper board disclosure, which, depending on how the SEC looks at it, may constitute securities fraud. Serena was quiet. He was building an exit fund, Jonathan said. That's the simplest way to understand what he was doing. He was quietly moving money so that when he eventually left, she said. Yes, he would have enough that any divorce settlement would be fought on much less favorable terms for you. He was trying to reduce his visible assets while increasing his hidden ones. She looked at the documents. She looked at them for a long time without speaking. Can we freeze his access, she asked. To the redirected funds, potentially yes. The Hastings Trust has grounds to seek an injunction on the basis that the money was diverted without proper authorization from the trust board. We can file Monday morning, which means by Monday afternoon, his access to those accounts could be suspended pending investigation. Monday morning, she said, after the gala. Jonathan nodded slowly. The timing is yes. If we file Monday, it coincides with whatever happens Saturday evening. Whatever happens Saturday evening will make the filing newsworthy rather than merely legal, she said. Jonathan looked at her for a moment. He had known her for 22 years. He had seen her in crisis before. He had never seen her like this, not cold, not angry, not calculating in any way that felt frightening. Just absolutely indestructibly clear. All right, he said. Monday morning, I'll have the papers ready. She nodded. Thank you, Jonathan. Serena, he paused. Are you all right? She looked at him. And for a moment, just a moment, something moved across her face that wasn't strategy. Something tired. Something that knew what it cost to sit in a penthouse apartment with $11 million of theft and $4 million of stolen heirloom and not cry. Not rage, not fall apart. I loved him, she said. It was the simplest thing she'd said in 3 days. I want to be clear that I know that I'm not confused about that. Jonathan said nothing. He just waited. But I also know, she continued, that the way you love someone does not obligate you to let them take everything from you. And I intend to take everything back. She paused. Every single thing. He gathered his papers. He stood. He put on his coat. At the door he turned. For what it's worth, he said, I think your grandfather would have been proud of you. She didn't respond to that, but after he left, she sat alone in the quiet apartment for 3 full minutes, hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed on nothing, and let herself feel exactly as much as she allowed herself to feel, which was enough. And then she stood up. And she went back to work. The gown arrived on Friday evening. Antoine brought it himself. He hung it on the back of the master bedroom door and stepped back, and they both looked at it in silence for a moment. It was exactly what she had imagined, and somehow more. The black was so deep, it looked like a void in the fabric of the room. The scarlet train, raw silk with the faintest brushed finish, emerged from the back hem like something inevitable. It moved when Antoine shifted the hanger, a slow, liquid movement, as if it had its own gravity. The choker arrives at 9 tomorrow morning, Antoine said. Victor made it overnight. Brutalist platinum. You'll understand when you see it. Does it look like armor? She asked. It looks like a declaration, he said. Which is better? She nodded. She looked at the gown. She thought about Chloe Davenport at Cipriani, laughing loud enough for everyone to hear the necklace that had belonged to Serena's great-grandmother, glittering at her throat like a trophy. She thought about Richard coming home that night with scotch on his breath and the face of a man who thought he was getting away with it. She thought about this gala, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the staircase, every eye in that room. Antoine, she said. Thank you. He picked up his coat. Don't thank me, he said. Just walk like you own the room, which you do, which you always have. He left. Serena stood alone with the gown and the city outside the window and the 4-day accumulation of everything she now knew and everything she was now going to do with it. She picked up her phone. She sent one text to Beatrice. It read, "Everything is ready." Beatrice's reply came back in 30 seconds. "So is the seating chart. She'll be in the corner by the service hallway, under the supplemental lighting rig. Every camera in the room will see her clearly when the moment comes." Serena read the message. She put the phone down. She looked at the gown one more time. Then she turned off the light and went to get some sleep, because she needed to be rested. Because in 24 hours she was going to walk into the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and she was going to take back every single thing that had ever been hers. And she was going to do it beautifully. Saturday morning arrived, the way important mornings always do, quietly without announcement, as if the world had not yet decided how serious it intended to be. Serena was awake before 5. She hadn't slept badly. She had simply finished sleeping the way a surgeon finishes resting before a long operation, not because rest was complete, but because the mind had already moved on to what came next. She made her own coffee. She stood at the window. The city below was still mostly dark, the park a long shadow between buildings, and she looked at it the way she had looked at it 10,000 mornings before. Except that this morning everything she saw felt different, sharper, more hers. She had 11 hours before the car arrived. She sat at her desk with her coffee, and she opened the financial documents Jonathan had sent, and she read them again, not because she had forgotten anything, but because she believed in knowing things so thoroughly that they became a part of your body, not just your mind. She read about the Delaware Holding Company. She read about the stock transactions. She read about the 4 years of quiet, methodical theft that Richard had conducted with the patience of a man who had always believed he was the smartest person in any room he entered. She thought about that. She thought about the particular arrogance of a man who steals from the woman he married and believes he will not be caught. Not because he is clever enough to hide it perfectly, but because he has decided somewhere deep in his assumptions that she will not look, that she is busy with other things, that she trusts him, that she loves him too much to suspect. He had been right about the love. He had been catastrophically wrong about everything else. Her phone buzzed at 6:15. Margot. "Good morning, Mrs. Sterling. Victor's assistant just confirmed delivery of the choker at 9. Antoine's team will be there at 11 for the fitting. Beatrice called last night after you went to sleep. She said the seating assignments are confirmed, and that you should know that Patricia Harmon from the Times will be positioned near the east staircase for arrivals." Serena set her coffee down. Patricia Harmon, the Times chief society correspondent, the woman whose column was read by every person who would be at the Crescent Moon Ball tonight, and then read again the following morning by everyone who wished they had been. "Did Beatrice arrange that?" Serena asked. "She said, and I'm quoting, 'Patricia owes me 3 favors, and I'm calling all of them in at once.'" Serena almost smiled. "Tell Beatrice thank you." She also said, still quoting, "Tell Serena not to thank me until after she's walked down that staircase and made every woman in that room wish she had her spine." This time Serena did smile. It was a real one. Small, but real. "I'll pass along my gratitude in person," she said. She hung up. She went to get dressed. At 9 o'clock exactly, Victor's assistant appeared at her door, a young woman named Clara, who carried the velvet case with both hands and the particular reverence of someone transporting something that mattered. Serena opened the case on her dining table and looked at what Victor had made. It was extraordinary. It was not a necklace in any conventional sense. It was a choker wide, flat, architectural, forged in brutalist platinum, asymmetrical in a way that looked deliberate and forceful rather than unfinished. It had no stones. It needed none. It was purely structural, a thing that said power without decoration, authority without ornament. It sat at the base of the throat like a declaration rather than an accessory. Serena picked it up. She held it. She felt the weight of it. "Victor wants you to know," Clara said quietly, "that he made it in one sitting. He said he understood what you needed, and he didn't want to overthink it." Serena set it back in the case. "Tell him it's exactly right," she said. Clara nodded and left. Serena stood alone with the choker and the gown, which still hung on the bedroom door, exactly where Antoine had left it the night before, and she felt for just a moment the full shape of what she was building. Not just a look, not just an entrance, a statement, A moment that would exist in photographs and in memory and in the particular kind of story that gets told and retold in this city for years. She thought about Richard waking up this morning. She thought about him choosing his tuxedo, straightening his cufflinks, calling Chloe to confirm the car time. She thought about him believing, genuinely believing that tonight was simply another gala. That Serena would attend as she always attended, and that the two of them would navigate the evening with the careful, practiced distance of a couple who had agreed without saying it aloud to be polite in public. He did not know about Jonathan's documents. He did not know that Beatrice had spent 3 days making 17 phone calls. He did not know about Antoine's gown, or Victor's choker, or Patricia Harmon positioned at the east staircase, or the seating chart that would place Chloe Davenport under a lighting rig in the farthest corner of the room where every camera would find her, and no one important would be near enough to shield her. He did not know any of it, and that Serena thought was the most satisfying part. At 11, Antoine arrived with his team. 2 assistants, a seamstress named Greta, who had worked with him for 30 years and who moved around Serena with the silent efficiency of someone who understood the value of precision, and a hairstylist named Marco, who said nothing when he arrived, simply looked at Serena's face for a long moment, nodded once, and began. The fitting took 90 minutes. The gown fit the way Antoine's work always fit, as if it had been made for this specific body on this specific day, which it had. Greta made 2 small adjustments at the waist and 1 at the shoulder. The scarlet train spread across the floor of the bedroom, and Serena stood in it and felt the fabric move with her when she shifted her weight, and understood viscerally why Antoine had chosen it. "Walk," Antoine said. She walked. Across the bedroom to the window, back again. Antoine watched. His face showed nothing for a moment. Then he said very quietly, "Yes, that's it." "The train doesn't drag," she said. It wasn't quite a question. "It follows," he said. "There's a difference. Dragging is reluctance. Following is authority." She looked at him. He was right, and they both knew it. Marco worked on her hair while the assistants packed up the seamstress tools. He built something that looked effortless and had taken 45 minutes, not a dramatic updo, not anything theatrical. Simply a silhouette that gave her neck full visibility, that made the choker the axis around which everything else organized itself. At 1:15, they were done. Antoine stood back and looked at her. Really looked the way he sometimes did when he was trying to see the whole picture, and he was quiet for long enough that one of his assistants shifted nervously. "Antoine," Serena said. "I'm thinking," he said. "About what?" "About whether there's anything I would change." A pause. "There isn't." He picked up his coat. "Don't let anyone touch your hair between now and 7. Don't let anyone talk you into earrings. The choker is the only thing your neck needs." He paused at the door. "And Serena, yes, whatever happens tonight, and I have heard things as one hears things in this city, whatever happens, do not rush. Do not raise your voice. Do not let anyone see you move faster than you want to move. The power is in the pace, always." She looked at him. "You've been talking to Beatrice." "Beatrice talks to everyone," he said. "That's why she knows everything." He smiled. "Good luck, though I don't think you need it." He left. The apartment was quiet. Serena sat down at her desk and called Beatrice. "I'm dressed," Beatrice said, answering immediately. "I've been ready since noon. At my age, you dress early because you never know what might take longer than expected." "How's the seating?" "Locked. Chloe Davenport is at table 27, back corner east wall. The supplemental lighting rig is directly overhead. You cannot miss her when you stand at the center of the room, and more importantly, every photographer working the floor will be able to see her clearly without obstruction." A pause. "She will not know any of this, of course. Richard requested a table near the center and received confirmation. He has no idea that the confirmation was for last year's table assignment, which I had quietly swapped." Serena absorbed this. "He thinks he's at table 8. Table 8 is where the Castellano family is seated, along with Judge Merriweather and both of the Alderman brothers. Richard will discover the reassignment when he arrives, and it will be too late to do anything about it without making a scene, which he will not want to do." Serena was quiet for a moment. "Beatrice, you are genuinely extraordinary." "I know, darling. I've known it for 50 years. A beat. Now, there's something I need to tell you, and I need you to hear it clearly. Serena sat up slightly. Tell me. I received a call this morning from Diane Ashworth. Serena recognized the name immediately. Diane Ashworth was on the Sterling Technologies board, had been for 6 years. She was 64, direct the kind of woman who called when she had something specific to say and never called otherwise. What did she say? She said that Richard approached 2 other board members last week, quietly, privately, and suggested that certain financial irregularities in Sterling Technologies' subsidiary accounts were the result of administrative error. He was, in her words, preemptively building a narrative, creating a story about accounting mistakes before anyone had a chance to call it what it actually is. Serena's hand tightened slightly around the phone. He knows. He suspects, Beatrice said. I think something triggered his awareness. Perhaps Jonathan contacted someone inadvertently. Perhaps Richard has his own sources inside the financial trail. But he is moving Serena. He is not sitting still. What did Diane tell him? That she would look into it. She did not commit to anything. She called me immediately after hanging up with him, which tells you where her loyalties actually sit. A pause. She also said, and this is the part you need to hear, that if you have documentation of what he's done, she wants to see it. She said the board deserves to know the truth, and that she would rather hear it from you than read it in the papers. Serena thought for exactly 3 seconds. Then she said, call Jonathan. Tell him to prepare a summary, clear, factual, no editorial language, and have it ready to be delivered to Diane by Monday morning. Same timing as the injunction. Already done, Beatrice said. Jonathan and I spoke at 8. He sends his regards and says the papers are ready and he will file the moment you give the word. Serena was quiet for a moment. She felt something shift in the structure of the plan, not weaken, but tighten. Richard moving meant Richard was afraid. Richard being afraid meant he had already felt something change, some tremor in the foundation of what he'd built, and his instinct was to get ahead of it. But he was doing it quietly, privately, without confrontation, which meant he still believed this was a conversation that could be managed, a narrative that could be controlled. He did not know that the narrative had already been taken out of his hands. Beatrice, she said. Yes. Thank you for all of it, for every phone call and every favor and every piece of this. Beatrice was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice had shifted, still sharp. Still Beatrice, but underneath it something warmer, something that had known Serena for 44 years. Your mother would have done the same for me, she said. She did actually in 1987. Different man, different betrayal, same principle. A beat. Now stop thanking me and go over your notes from Jonathan one more time and eat something. You'll want to be sharp tonight, and you can't be sharp on an empty stomach. Serena hung up. She went to the kitchen. She made herself eat eggs toast, nothing elaborate, and she thought about Richard talking to board members, building a preemptive defense, trying to control a story he didn't yet fully understand, was already beyond his control. She thought about Chloe Davenport getting dressed right now somewhere in the city, probably excited, probably wearing the necklace, the real one, the Tears of the Ocean, which Richard had taken from the family safe and given to her, because he was the kind of man who uses other people's legacies as currency in his own transactions. Probably not thinking about what tonight actually meant. Not yet. That was all right. She would understand it later. They both would. At 4:30, her phone rang. She didn't recognize the number. She almost didn't answer. Then something made her pick up. Is this Serena Sterling? The voice was young, female, slightly unsteady the way voices are when someone is nervous and trying not to sound it. Serena went very still. Who is this? A pause. Then, my name is Chloe Davenport. The silence that followed lasted perhaps 4 seconds and felt considerably longer. Serena did not speak. She waited. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, Chloe said. The nervousness was more audible now. And I'm not calling to apologize exactly because I'm not sure an apology from me would mean anything to you, but A breath. I need to ask you something. Then ask it, Serena said. Her voice was even, completely even. The necklace Richard gave me. Chloe stopped, started again. He told me it was a family piece that had been in storage, that it wasn't being used. He said, another stop. He said you two had agreed he could give it away, as a gift. Serena said nothing. That's not true, is it? Chloe said. It was not quite a question. Still, Serena said nothing. Mrs. Sterling. Chloe's voice had dropped. The nervousness had changed quality, become something rawer. I'm not stupid. I know what this looks like from where you're standing, and I know I don't have any right to ask you for anything, but I need to know if that necklace is what I think it is. What do you think it is? Serena said. Something that doesn't belong to me. A long pause. It belonged to my great-grandmother, Serena said. It was given to her in 1923. It has passed through 4 generations of Hastings women. It is not something Richard had any right to give to anyone. She heard Chloe exhale, a shaky sound. He told me, I know what he told you. Serena's voice didn't rise. It stayed exactly where it was. He told you what was convenient. He told you what would make you feel like you were receiving something meaningful rather than something stolen. Silence. I didn't know, Chloe said. Her voice was very small now. About the necklace. I swear I didn't know. I believe you, Serena said, and she did actually, which was its own kind of complicated. What are you going to do? Chloe asked. Serena was quiet for a moment. She thought about all of it, the 4 days of preparation, the gown, the choker, the seating chart, the injunction waiting to be filed. Monday morning, Diane Ashworth waiting to receive documentation. Patricia Harmon stationed at the east staircase, Beatrice who had spent 3 days making this evening into something precise and unstoppable. I am going to attend the gala tonight, Serena said. I am going to reclaim what is mine, all of it. A pause. What you do with that information is your own decision to make. Another silence. Then, he doesn't love me. Chloe said it flatly. Does he? Serena thought about that, about what it meant, about the 24-year-old on the other end of the phone who had walked into a restaurant and worn a stolen heirloom and laughed too loudly, who had believed a man who told her convenient things because she had wanted to believe him. I don't think Richard loves anyone very much, Serena said. Except Richard. She heard something on the other end of the line that might have been a small, painful laugh, or might have been something that wasn't quite a laugh. Then silence. I'm sorry, Chloe said finally. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Serena looked out the window. The city was bright in the late afternoon, all gold and glass. She thought about all the things she could say, all the sharp, accurate things that were perfectly available to her. Wear the necklace tonight, she said instead. A sharp intake of breath. What? Wear the necklace, come to the gala, and when the moment comes, let me handle the rest. A very long pause. Long enough that Serena wondered if the line had dropped. Why? Chloe asked finally. Because what happens tonight needs to happen in front of the people who need to see it, and because you wearing that necklace is the last piece of something that needs to be completed. She paused. And because what he did to me, he did to both of us, in different ways, with different tools. But he did it to both of us. The silence stretched, then very quietly. All right. All right, Serena repeated. She hung up. She sat for a moment with the phone in her hands. Then she set it down on the desk, smoothed her hands flat on the surface, and breathed. She had not planned the phone call. She had not planned Chloe. But she had learned over 51 years and 3 restructured companies and 2 children and 1 marriage and 100 moments that required her to adapt without showing the adaptation that sometimes the plan changes, and the only question is whether you change with it or get left behind. She had changed with it. She had turned an unexpected variable into something she could use, not cruelty, not mercy exactly, something more practical than either, something that served the truth. At 5:45, she stood up. She went to the bedroom. She put on the gown. She fastened the choker at her throat. She looked at herself in the mirror for exactly as long as it took to confirm that what she saw was what she intended, and then she turned away from the mirror because she didn't need it anymore. She picked up her phone. She texted Beatrice, leaving in an hour. Beatrice's reply was immediate. The room is ready, so am I, so are you. She put the phone in her evening bag. She went to the window one more time. The city was moving below her cabs and pedestrians, and the long tail of headlights, and she watched it for a moment. This city she had lived in for 30 years. This city that had watched her build and lose and build again, that had witnessed everything and forgotten nothing, that would witness one more thing tonight and add it to the long account of everything it knew about what people were capable of when they were cornered or powerful or both. She was not cornered. That was the thing Richard had failed to understand. He had spent 4 years quietly preparing for a future in which she would be weakened, reduced, unable to respond. He had underestimated fundamentally and fatally the difference between a woman who is still and a woman who is waiting. She turned from the window. She walked to the door of the apartment. She opened it. 11 floors below, a car was waiting. In 3 hours, the Metropolitan Museum of Art would be full of every person in New York who mattered in the ways that New York measured mattering. In 3 hours, Richard Sterling would arrive with Chloe Davenport on his arm and $4 million of stolen heritage at her throat and the absolute conviction that he had already won. Serena stepped into the elevator. The doors closed. She descended. The car pulled up to the Metropolitan Museum of Art at 8:47, and Serena did not move immediately when it stopped. She sat for exactly 3 seconds. 3 seconds of absolute stillness. The city noise muffled behind the tinted glass, the weight of the platinum choker at her throat, the scarlet train pooled around her feet in the footwell. 3 seconds of being completely alone with herself and everything she knew and everything she intended. Then she opened the door herself. She had told the driver not to come around, and she stepped out. The air hit her. Cold, clean, the particular sharpness of a New York October night that makes you feel exactly as awake as you need to be. She heard the cameras before she heard anything else. Not a wall of sound. She had timed her arrival deliberately, not at the peak of the entrance rush, but 20 minutes after, when the crowd on the steps had thinned and the photographers were restless and bored and looking for something worth shooting. She knew this museum's steps. She had walked them 40 times. She knew exactly where to stand and how to move and at what pace. She moved at the pace Antoine had told her to use, the pace that meant you were not hurrying toward anything because everything was already coming to you. She heard someone say her name. Then she heard it again differently, not a greeting, but an announcement. Serena Sterling, spoken by someone who had recognized her and turned to tell the person beside them. The ripple of that recognition moved through the people still on the steps faster than she did, which was exactly the point. Patricia Harmon was at the east side of the entrance. Serena saw her the moment she reached the top of the steps. Patricia was 55, had been covering Manhattan society for 27 years, and had the specific quality of attention of someone who has learned to distinguish between things that look important and things that actually are. She looked at Serena the way a camera finds focus, with a small, sudden sharpening of everything. They made eye contact for half a second. Serena gave the smallest possible nod. Patricia lifted her recorder almost imperceptibly. The exchange took less than 2 seconds and contained everything that needed to be communicated. Inside the crescent moon, Ball was at full altitude. The museum's great hall had been transformed, not that Serena looked at the transformation, because she was not thinking about the room, she was thinking about the people in it and the specific geography of where each of them stood in relation to what was about to happen. She had been to enough galas in this building to know it by feel, by sound, by the way voices carried and eyes tracked and groups formed and reformed around the shifting centers of whatever the evening decided mattered. She handed her wrap to a member of the coat staff without looking at him, keeping her eyes level, her expression composed but not closed, composed but open. A face that said she was exactly where she intended to be. Beatrice found her in 45 seconds. Beatrice was wearing midnight blue she always wore, midnight blue at winter events had. For 30 years, it was her signature, and she moved through the room with the unhurried authority of a woman who had attended this gala before most of the other guests were born. "They're here," Beatrice said quietly, arriving at Serena's side without breaking stride, so that they were simply two women walking together rather than two women having a conversation. "He arrived 18 minutes ago. There was a small issue about the table." "How did he handle it?" "Poorly," Beatrice said with a satisfaction she didn't bother to conceal. He spoke to the event coordinator in a voice that was too controlled to be calm. The coordinator, a lovely woman named Helena, who I've known for 12 years, was extremely apologetic and extremely firm. Table 29 was the best she could offer on short notice. He took it. Table 29, Serena said. That's worse than 27. Yes, Helena is very good at her job. A beat. Chloe is at 27, he is at 29. They are close enough that everyone will see them together, but far enough that the distance itself tells its own story. Serena absorbed this. And the necklace? Around her throat, Beatrice said. Every stone. She's wearing it with a white gown, which was either extremely good instinct or extremely bad judgment. Against the white, it's unavoidable. You cannot look at her without seeing it. They moved deeper into the room. Serena could feel the shift in the crowd's attention. Not all of it, not loudly, but the specific subcurrent of awareness that travels through a social gathering when something significant has entered. She had been at enough of these evenings to know the difference between being noticed and being watched. She was being watched. "Where is he right now?" she asked. "Near the bar east side. He's with Marcus Webb and Denton Farley. He has his back to the main entrance, which means he hasn't seen you yet." "Good," Serena said. "Let's keep it that way for a few more minutes." She stopped near a cluster of people she knew, the Holloway family and Carla Singh from the Whitmore Foundation and Judge Merriweather's wife Eleanor, and she joined their conversation. She did it naturally, asking Eleanor about her daughter's residency program in Boston, asking Carla about the Whitmore's new endowment initiative, listening and responding with the full weight of her attention, the way she always did. Because the most important social skill she had ever developed was the ability to make the person in front of her feel like the most important person in the room. The group responded to her immediately. The energy shifted, brightened. People from nearby clusters drifted slightly closer the way they always did when Serena Sterling stopped to talk. Not obviously, not rudely, just the unconscious gravitational pull of someone who commands a room without ever demanding it. And then she heard it. Across the distance of the room, in a lull in the surrounding noise, she heard Richard's voice say her name. Not to her, to someone else. The particular tight quality of a man who has just seen something he wasn't prepared for and is trying to recalibrate faster than his face will allow. She did not turn around. She continued her conversation with Eleanor Merriweather, who was describing her daughter's hospital in Boston with the specific pride of a mother who has been waiting to tell this story to someone who would actually listen. "That's remarkable," Serena said. "She must have worked extraordinarily hard." She heard footsteps behind her. Measured. Controlled. Richard's gait, she knew it after 23 years, the way you know the sound of a door in your own house. He came around to her left side. She saw him in her peripheral vision before she acknowledged him, that half second of processing that she allowed herself, taking in the tuxedo. The careful hair, the expression on his face that was trying to be neutral and was achieving something closer to trapped. "Serena," he said. She turned to him with the full grace of someone for whom turning is never hurried. "Richard," she said it pleasantly, the way you say the name of someone you have known for a very long time and are entirely prepared for. "I didn't realize you'd arrived." His eyes moved over her, the gown, the choker, the train fast and controlled the way someone calculates damage while trying not to look like they're calculating anything. "You look—" He stopped. "Thank you," she said, as if he had completed the sentence with something adequate. Eleanor Merriweather had gone slightly alert beside her. Carla Singh had gone very still in the way of someone who understands they may be witnessing something important. "Can I speak with you?" Richard said. He kept his voice low. "Privately." "Of course," Serena said. "After dinner. I believe we're being seated shortly." She turned back to Eleanor with a smile. "You were saying about the fellowship." "Serena." His voice had an edge now, just a thread of it. "Please." She looked at him again, and this time she let him see something in her face, not anger, not grief, just the absolute clarity of a woman who knows exactly where she stands. "Richard," she said quietly, "this is not the moment, and you know it." He looked at her for 3 full seconds. Then he turned and walked back across the room. Carla Singh exhaled almost inaudibly. Eleanor Merriweather found something very interesting on her program card. Serena returned to the conversation as if nothing had happened, and she meant it nothing had happened. The actual thing had not happened yet. The seating bell rang at 9:15. The room began its organized migration toward the dining areas, and Serena moved with it not quickly, not slowly, with the pace that Antoine had prescribed, and that she had now made entirely her own. Beatrice appeared at her elbow again. "He's going to the table," she said. "He figured out where she's seated, and he's angry about it. Not visibly, you'd have to know what his angry looks like." "I know what his angry looks like," Serena said. "He's trying to find Helena to get the seating reassigned." "Helena won't do it. Helena has already told him the seating is fixed and smiled at him the way she smiles when she means it's absolutely not changing." A pause. "He is going to the table." Serena allowed herself one small breath of satisfaction. Good. She found her own table 1, which was where she had sat for 7 of the last 9 crescent moon balls, which was not near Richard's new assignment and not near Chloe's, which was precisely at the geographic and social center of the room, from which she could see every table, and every table could see her. Beatrice sat to her left. Margaret Chen, who had first mentioned the necklace to her a week ago, sat to her right, and her expression when she looked at Serena held the particular quiet solidarity of a woman who understands what is happening and has chosen her side. Serena looked across the room toward table 27. Chloe Davenport was already seated. She was 24 years old, and she was wearing the tears of the ocean and a white gown, and she sat in the circle of the supplemental lighting rig with the specific solitude of someone who has realized too late that the room is arranged in a way she didn't expect. The people at her table were polite. They were not her allies, and they were not Richard's allies either. They were simply people who had been placed there by a seating chart that had been designed with surgical precision by a 73-year-old woman in midnight blue. Chloe looked across the room. She found Serena's eyes. The distance between them was 30 feet and the width of everything this evening contained. Serena looked at her steadily for a moment, not unkindly, not warmly, simply with the full weight of a woman who knows exactly what is going to happen and has decided to let the other person know it too. Then she looked away. She picked up her water glass. She turned to Margaret Chen and said, "Tell me about your trip to Florence. You mentioned it at the Whitmore dinner, and I never got to hear the rest." Margaret blinked. Then she laughed a small, slightly astonished laugh. "You're incredible, you know that." "I'm composed," Serena said. "There's a difference." The dinner proceeded. First course, second course, the room filling with the particular sound of 100 conversations happening simultaneously. Serena ate, she talked, she listened. She was to every external measurement simply a woman enjoying an evening. And she was in the way that someone can genuinely enjoy an evening while also tracking with quiet peripheral precision exactly where every relevant person is in the room and exactly how the situation is developing. Richard did not approach her again. She was aware of him at table 29, could feel the specific tension of his stillness from across the room, the way you can feel weather before it arrives. He ate without appearing to taste anything. He spoke to the people around him without appearing to hear their responses. He was a man sitting in the middle of an event he could no longer read, surrounded by variables he could no longer control, and the experience was clearly costing him something. It was costing him composure, and for Richard, composure was everything. It was the armor he wore. It was the thing that made him convincing in boardrooms and bedrooms and every space in between. Without it, he was just a man who had stolen from his wife and was beginning to suspect that she knew. At 10:12, Beatrice leaned toward Serena and said very quietly, "Patricia Harmon is positioned near the north pillar. Her photographer is at the south. They have the whole room between them." "I see them," Serena said. "Marcus Webb just asked Richard something, and Richard gave him a one-word answer. Marcus has not spoken to him since." "What was the question?" "I couldn't hear, but Marcus's expression after the answer told me it wasn't a satisfying one." Serena set down her fork. She touched the choker lightly, not nervously, just the way you touch something to confirm it is exactly where it should be. Then she folded her napkin on the table with the particular finality of someone who has finished eating and is now ready for the second half of the evening. "It's time," she said. Beatrice nodded. She did not ask if Serena was sure. She had known Serena for 44 years, and she understood that certainty at this level does not require confirmation. Serena stood. She did it without announcement, without drama, without the kind of deliberate pause that signals to a room that something theatrical is about to happen. She simply rose from her chair at the natural cadence of someone who has decided to stand, and she moved toward the center of the room where the Crescent Moon Ball's host platform was positioned, a raised area with a microphone, traditionally used for the evening's presentations and the charity announcements that anchored the second half of every gala. The host, Gerald Whitfield, was moving toward the platform himself. He was 66, the longtime ceremonial chair of the Gala committee, a man who understood his role in these evenings with the precision of a conductor. He saw Serena approaching, and his expression shifted, not alarm, but the slight recalibration of a man who has just understood that the evening's program may be about to change. She reached him before he reached the platform. "Gerald," she said quietly, "I need 3 minutes." He looked at her. He looked at the choker. He looked at the room behind her, the specific quality of attention that was beginning to organize itself in their direction as people noticed where she was standing. He was an intelligent man. He had known the Hastings family for 30 years. He put together what he needed to put together in the span of about 4 seconds. "The floor is yours," he said, after the Whitmore announcement. "Thank you." She stood beside the platform and waited. The Whitmore Foundation announcement took 4 minutes. Carla Singh spoke clearly and gratefully. The room applauded. Carla returned to her table. Gerald stepped to the microphone. He spoke briefly about the history of the Crescent Moon Ball, the tradition of the evening, the importance of the assembled community. Standard language, warm. The room settled into the receptive half-attentiveness of an audience that expects what it always gets. Then Gerald said, "I'd like to invite Serena Hastings Sterling to say a few words." He used both names. Hastings first. Serena had not asked him to do that. He had done it on his own, and in those 2 names she heard 20 years of accumulated respect and something that felt unexpectedly like being caught by something solid. She stepped to the microphone. The room's attention reorganized itself completely in the span of about 3 seconds. Not loudly, not dramatically. Simply the way a room goes quiet when it recognizes that what is about to happen is not what it expected. She looked out at the faces. She found Margaret Chen. She found Diane Ashworth, who had come alone tonight and was seated near the west wall, with the careful stillness of someone who has been briefed and is ready. She found Marcus Webb, whose expression was the sharp attentiveness of a man who covers financial news and has just realized he may be in the middle of a story. She found Patricia Harmon at the North Pillar with her recorder and her photographer. She found Beatrice in midnight blue, watching with the calm satisfaction of a woman who has spent 3 days building this moment and intends to enjoy every second of it. She found Richard. He was looking at her with the expression of a man who has just felt the ground shift and does not yet know in which direction he is going to fall. And she found Chloe Davenport 30 feet away in the corner by the service corridor, under the supplemental lighting that made the sapphires at her throat brilliant and unmistakable. Looking at Serena with the expression of someone who made a phone call 4 hours ago and is now understanding fully and finally exactly what that phone call set in motion. Serena placed both hands on the edges of the lectern, not gripping, just resting, grounded. "The Crescent Moon Ball has been part of my life for 22 years, she said. Her voice was even warm, fully projected without effort. "My husband and I attended our first one the year after we married. I remember thinking that this room, this particular gathering of people, represented something I admired. Not wealth exactly, not status. Something more particular than that, a kind of accountability. The sense that the people in this room were here not just to be seen, but to see each other clearly." The room was absolutely quiet. "I've been thinking about accountability a great deal this week," she said. "About what it means to see people clearly. About what it costs to look at the truth of a situation and choose to address it rather than look away." She paused. Not for effect, or not only for effect. Because she needed one breath of space before the next thing she said, which was the thing that changed everything. "Many of you know this Tears of the Ocean," she said. It's been in my family for over 100 years. My great-grandmother Eleanor wore it on her wedding day. My grandmother wore it to this event in this room in 1961. My mother wore it the year my father was awarded the Whitmore Medal. She paused. I wore it the night my daughter was born. The room had not moved. Not a chair scraping, not a glass set down. It is not just a piece of jewelry, she said. It is a Hastings family document. It is a record of who we are and what we have built across 4 generations. And 3 weeks ago, it left my possession without my knowledge or consent. She looked out at the room. She let the silence do exactly what silence does when it is placed precisely where it belongs. I'm telling you this, she said, not because I want your sympathy. I have never wanted that. I'm telling you because this room, these people, this event, you are the community that my family has been part of for generations. And I believe this community deserves to know the truth about certain things, about what the Hastings name represents and what it does not represent, about what I have built and what I intend to protect. She paused, and about the fact that I am still here. I am standing at this microphone in this room in my great-grandmother's tradition, and I am not broken, and I am not diminished, and I am not going anywhere. I won't buy this. She stepped back from the microphone. The applause began slowly and then was not slow at all. It came from Margaret Chen first, and then from Diane Ashworth, and then from Eleanor Merriweather and Carla Singh, and Gerald Whitfield himself, and then from the whole room in the way a room applauds when something true has just been said in a place where truth is not always the primary currency. She did not look at Richard. She didn't need to. She could feel him from across the room the way you feel a drop temperature, a sudden coldness where there had been warmth. The specific chill of a man understanding that the story he thought he was telling has just been taken out of his hands by someone who has been holding a better one all along. She walked back toward her table. She did not hurry. She did not look at the corner where Chloe sat. She did not look toward table 29. She looked at Beatrice, who was standing and applauding with the kind of expression that contained 3 days of work and 44 years of knowing someone, and the particular pride of a woman who has watched the person she loves do exactly what she was always capable of doing. Serena reached her chair. She sat down. She picked up her water glass and drank. Margaret Chen leaned toward her and said very quietly, "That was the bravest thing I've seen in this room in 20 years." Serena set down the glass. "It was the most necessary," she said. And that was the difference. That had always been the difference between brave and necessary, between performing strength and simply using it. She had not stood at that microphone because she was brave. She had stood there because it was the only honest thing left to do, and she had never in 51 years been able to live comfortably with dishonesty, not even the kind that would have been easier for everyone. From across the room, she heard Richard's chair push back from the table. She did not turn around. She heard his footsteps, not his measured, controlled gait this time. Faster, uneven. The footsteps of a man making a decision that is not actually a decision, but a reaction. Beatrice's hand found hers under the table. A brief, firm pressure. Not sympathy, just confirmation. Serena held it for 1 second. Then she straightened her back and looked at the room and waited for whatever came next, because whatever it was, she was ready. Richard Sterling crossed the room in 11 seconds. Serena knew because she counted them without looking at him, tracking his approach by the way the conversations around her went quiet in sequence, table by table, person by person, the social equivalent of a warning system. When he arrived at her chair, she was still looking forward, still composed, one hand resting lightly on the table beside her water glass. "Outside," he said. His voice was low and tightly controlled. The voice of a man who has decided that control is the only thing he has left and is holding it with both hands. "Now." She turned to look at him. She took her time with it. "Richard," she said at a volume that the 4 people immediately around them could hear clearly. "I think we're both exactly where we should be." His jaw tightened. "Serena, sit down," she said quietly. Not a suggestion. He didn't sit, but he didn't walk away either. He stood at the edge of her table, and she watched the calculation happening behind his eyes, the rapid failing arithmetic of a man trying to determine which move costs him the least in a room full of people who are now watching with the focused attention of an audience that understands it is at the theater. Marcus Webb, 3 tables away, had stopped pretending to look at his phone. Patricia Harmon had moved from the north pillar and was now positioned near the east side of the room with the specific stillness of someone who has identified where the story is and is not going to miss it. "You want to do this here?" Richard said. It came out flatter than he intended. "I've already done it," she said pleasantly. "Did you hear my remarks? I thought Gerald introduced me very well." Something moved across his face, something that was not quite fury and not quite desperation, a combination of both fighting for space behind the careful architecture of his expression. "What have you done?" he said. It was not a question. It was a man taking inventory of his losses in real time. "I've been transparent," she said, "with the community I've been part of for 22 years, about my family's history and my family's property." She paused. "Is there something about that you'd like to dispute in front of these people who are all listening?" He looked around the room. She watched him do it, watched him take in Marcus Webb and Patricia Harmon and Diane Ashworth and Gerald Whitfield and the 40 or 50 faces that were turned in their direction with varying degrees of subtlety. She watched him understand fully and completely that he was standing in the middle of a room that has already chosen a side, and the side it chose was not his. He sat down. Not at her table. There was no chair for him at her table, which was not accidental, but at the empty seat of someone who had stepped away 2 places to her left. He sat because standing was worse. "What do you actually want?" he said. His voice had changed. The performance of control had dropped away, slightly replaced by something raw, something that almost sounded like the man she had married 23 years ago, before the money got big enough to change the geometry of who he thought he was. "I want the truth told," she said. "I've started that process tonight. Jonathan will continue it Monday morning." His eyes sharpened. "Jonathan?" "He's filing with this court Monday morning," she said, keeping her voice at the same pleasant conversational register she had maintained throughout. "The injunction covers the Delaware accounts, all of them, and the SEC inquiry that's a separate matter, but Jonathan felt it was the appropriate next step given the nature of the stock transactions." Richard's face went through several things very quickly. She watched all of them. The initial flash of something that might have been genuine shock, not that she knew, but that she knew this much. Then calculation. Then something that looked briefly like despair before he sealed it back up. "You can't," he started. "The Hastings Trust Board authorized the filing last Thursday," she said. "Unanimously, they've been aware of the financial discrepancies for 10 days. He stared at her. 10 days. He said it very quietly. "You've known for 10 days. 11, she said. "I wanted to be thorough before I acted." He was quiet for a moment. Around them, the room had not resumed normal conversation. The pretense of people not listening had mostly collapsed. This was the Metropolitan Museum of Art at the Crescent Moon Ball, and what was happening at Table 1 was the kind of thing that people in this room would remember and discuss for years. And everyone present understood that, and the understanding had produced a particular quality of collective silence, not uncomfortable, but loaded, the way the air feels before rain finally arrives. "Is this about the necklace?" he asked finally. "Among other things." "I can explain." "Richard." She stopped him with the gentleness of someone who knows there is no explanation worth hearing. "I've seen the documents. Jonathan has seen the documents. Diane Ashworth has been briefed on the documents. There is no explanation that changes what the documents show." She paused. "I think you know that." He looked at her, and in that look she saw something that she had not expected, or perhaps had expected, but had not fully prepared herself to feel. She saw grief, not for her, not for what he'd done to her, something more self-contained than that, the grief of a man who has been extremely intelligent his entire life, and has now for the first time encountered the full cost of having used that intelligence badly. It was not her problem, she knew that, but she felt it anyway briefly because she had loved him, and the part of her that had loved him was still capable of recognizing when he was in pain, even when the pain was entirely of his own making. "I never wanted this to happen this way," he said. "I know," she said. You wanted it to happen your way, quietly, on your schedule, with me having significantly less information than I currently have. She met his eyes. That was always the plan, wasn't it? Not to destroy me, just to reduce me, to leave me with less than what I started with, so that you could leave with more. He said nothing. That's what I find most difficult, she said quietly. Not the affair, not even the money, though the money was a particular kind of contempt. What I find most difficult is the patience of it, the 4 years of patience, the care you took to do it slowly so I wouldn't notice until it was too late. She paused. I find it difficult because I know how much patience costs, and you spent all of yours on taking from me instead of on anything worth keeping. The silence between them lasted exactly 4 seconds. Then Beatrice's hand found Serena's arm, not urgently, just a presence, and Serena looked up and across the room and saw what Beatrice had already seen. Chloe Davenport was walking toward them. She was moving through the room with the particular determination of someone who has made a decision and is executing it before she can think herself out of it. She was 24 years old, and she was wearing the tears of the ocean and a white gown that made her look very young, and she was walking toward Serena Sterling with the expression of someone who called a woman 4 hours ago and promised to trust her, and is now finding out what that trust actually requires. Richard saw her when she was 12 feet away. His face changed immediately, something complicated and involuntary, the face of a man confronting the two consequences of the same decision at the same time, in the same room, in front of the same audience. "Chloe," he said. A warning. She didn't look at him. She looked at Serena. She stopped 3 feet away. The supplemental lighting from across the room was not strong here, but it didn't need to be. The necklace at her throat caught the ambient light of the chandeliers and gave it back in 7 distinct points of blue fire that every person within 30 feet could see clearly. "Mrs. Sterling," she said. "Chloe," Serena said. Chloe reached up and unclasped the necklace. Her hands were steady, which Serena suspected cost her something. She held it out, $4 million of Hastings family history lying across the palm of a 24-year-old's hand, and she said, "This belongs to you. It always did." The room's silence had reached a quality that Serena had never experienced before in 40 years of attending these events. Not the silence of people pretending not to listen. The silence of people who have stopped pretending entirely and are simply openly holding their breath. Richard said, "Chloe, don't." "You told me she agreed," Chloe said. She turned to look at him now, and her voice was very controlled, but it had the particular tension of something that has been decided under great personal cost. "You told me it was in storage. You told me she knew." A pause. "You told me a lot of things." Richard opened his mouth, closed it. "I'm not doing this for you," Chloe said to Serena. "I want to be honest about that. I'm doing it because I don't want to be the person who keeps something that isn't hers, because it was easier not to ask questions." She paused. Her voice had gone slightly unsteady at the edges, the first sign of the effort this was costing her. "And because I think you were right on the phone today, about what he did to both of us, in different ways." Serena looked at the necklace in Chloe's hand for a moment. Then she reached out and took it. The weight of it was exactly as she remembered, heavier than it looked, the way real things always are. "Thank you," she said quietly. Chloe nodded once. Then she turned and walked back across the room without looking at Richard again. Serena watched her go. There was something in the way she moved straight-backed, deliberate, the walk of someone who has just done a difficult thing and is carrying it correctly, that Serena found herself unexpectedly respecting. Then she looked at Richard. He was looking at where Chloe had been. His face was the face of a man watching a structure collapse. Not one structure, several simultaneously. The affair, the financial plan, the narrative he had been constructing with board members, the composure he had walked into this building wearing, all of it going at once in front of everyone who mattered. "Richard," Serena said. He looked at her. "I think you should go home," she said, "tonight. And I think you should have your attorney call Jonathan on Monday morning. And I think, if you are as intelligent as you have always believed yourself to be, you will understand that what happens next depends entirely on how cooperative you choose to be." She paused. "I'm not interested in destroying you publicly. I never was. I'm interested in what's mine, all of it, back." He stared at her for a long moment. Something was happening behind his eyes, the kind of processing that happens when the entire framework of a plan encounters the reality that it has failed. Not partially failed, comprehensively. He stood. He straightened his jacket. He looked around the room one more time, and she could see him reading it, reading the faces, the postures, the expressions of the people who had watched everything that had just happened. And she watched him understand that there was nothing left to manage here. No narrative to control, no story to shape. The story had already been told, and it had been told by a woman in a black gown with a scarlet train who had stood at a microphone and spoken about accountability and meant every word. He left without saying anything else. She watched him cross the room. The measured walk was back, but it cost him visibly the way good posture costs you when you're exhausted. And she watched him hand his ticket to a coat attendant at the far door, and she watched him step through it and disappear. The room exhaled, not literally. But the quality of the air changed. The held breath tension released conversations resumed the particular relief of a gathering that has witnessed something significant and is now allowed to process it. Serena heard voices around her, not hushed anymore. Alive. Beatrice leaned toward her. Patricia Harmon took photographs, she said, of the moment Chloe returned the necklace. She was positioned perfectly. I know, Serena said. Diane Ashworth is speaking to Marcus Webb. Beatrice paused. Marcus is very interested. I know that too. Serena. Beatrice's voice had shifted into something quieter, something that had nothing to do with strategy. How are you? Serena looked at the necklace in her hand. She closed her fingers around it. She felt the weight of it. The real weight, not just platinum and sapphires, but 100 years of women who had held it exactly as she was holding it now, some of them in joy, and some of them in difficulty, and all of them in the knowledge that what they held was not just beautiful, but true. I'm all right, she said, and she meant it, not in the polished, managed way she had meant things for the last 11 days. Actually, the kind of all right that comes from having done the thing that needed doing, and having done it as cleanly as it could be done. Good, Beatrice said, because the evening is not over, and you should know that half the room is going to want to come speak to you in the next 20 minutes, and I think you should let them. Serena almost smiled. You're already managing my social calendar. I'm always managing your social calendar, Beatrice said. That's why everything works. The first person to approach was Gerald Whitfield. He came to her table with a glass of champagne that he set in front of her without ceremony and said, I want you to know I meant the introduction exactly as I gave it. Hastings first. I know you did, she said. Thank you, Gerald. He nodded once, the specific nod of a person of a certain age and standing who has decided that words have been adequately used and further ones are unnecessary. Then he moved away. Margaret Chen came next, and then Carla Singh, and then 3 women from the Whitmore board whom Serena had known for 15 years, and then Judge Merriweather's wife Eleanor, who took Serena's hand in both of hers and said, Your mother would have stood up and cheered, which was the truest and most difficult thing anyone said to her all evening. She held Eleanor's hands for a moment. She did not cry. She had made a specific decision 11 days ago about when she would allow herself to cry, and it was not here and not yet. But she felt the threat of it brief, clean something that moved through her chest and passed, and she was glad Eleanor was still holding her hands when it did. At 11:15, Diane Ashworth came to the table. She was 64, direct-framed, and she carried the very specific authority of a woman who has spent 30 years in rooms where decisions get made and has long since stopped being uncomfortable with the weight of them. She sat in the chair that had been empty since Richard left, and she did not preamble. I spoke with Marcus Webb, she said. He's filing a story. He has the documentation Jonathan prepared or the summary of it. He was careful to tell me he's verifying independently before he publishes, which I appreciated. When? Serena asked. Sunday morning if his editor clears it tonight. Diane paused. It will run before Jonathan files the injunction Monday morning. The sequence is important. If the story runs first, the filing becomes news. If the filing comes first, it's a legal matter. Legal matters have lawyers who can manage them. News is harder to manage. Serena looked at her. You arranged the sequence. Marcus and I have known each other for 18 years, Diane said. I told him what I knew. He understood what it meant. a beat. "Serena, I want to ask you something directly." "Ask it." "Is your intention to take Sterling Technologies from him entirely, or to remove him from the operational role and stabilize the company?" Serena had thought about this. She had thought about it carefully, the way she thought about everything, not with emotion, but with the specific discipline of someone who knows the difference between what feels satisfying in the short term and what produces the right outcome in the long term. "The company employs 412 people," she said. "Most of them had nothing to do with what Richard did. My intention is to ensure appropriate leadership transitions that protect the company's function and its employees, while holding Richard individually accountable for his specific conduct." She paused. "I'm not interested in burning it down. I'm interested in setting it right." Diane looked at her for a moment. Then she said, "The board will support a management review. I can confirm 3 votes tonight, and I believe 2 more by Monday." "That's a majority," Serena said. "Yes." A pause. "I should have looked more carefully at the subsidiary accounts 2 years ago. That's my failure, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise." "It was designed to be difficult to see," Serena said. "That's generous of you." "It's accurate," Serena said. "Richard is not a stupid man. What he did required real intelligence applied entirely in the wrong direction." She paused. "The board's support going forward is what matters, not who should have caught it earlier." Diane studied her for a moment. Then she stood. "I'll be in touch Monday morning, before the filing if possible." She extended her hand. Serena shook it firm, direct the handshake of 2 people who have just agreed to something real. Diane moved away. Serena looked across the room at table 27, which was now occupied by people finishing dessert and having the kind of animated, released conversation that follows the end of tension. Chloe Davenport's chair was empty. She had left sometime in the last 30 minutes. Serena hadn't seen her go. She thought about that, the 24-year-old who had called her on a Saturday afternoon and told the truth, and then come across a ballroom floor and done the harder thing, and who had then disappeared quietly into whatever came next for her. She hoped distantly and genuinely that it would be better than what had preceded it. She had no particular reason to invest in Chloe Davenport's future, but she had enough experience with difficult decisions made under pressure to recognize when someone had made one correctly, and Chloe had. At 11:45, Beatrice announced that she was leaving. "I am 73 years old," she said. "I have been managing this evening since Wednesday. I am going home." Serena stood and embraced her. Beatrice held on for a moment longer than strictly necessary, the way she sometimes did, the particular grip of someone who is reminding you that they are still here, that they have always been here. "You did it beautifully," Beatrice said into her ear. "Better than I planned it, actually, and I planned it well." "The phone call from Chloe I didn't plan," Serena said. "No," Beatrice agreed, pulling back to look at her. "But you knew what to do with it. That's not planning. That's character." She straightened Serena's choker, a small, instinctive gesture, the way you straighten something on someone you love. "Your mother would have stood up and cheered," she said. "Eleanor Merriweather was right." She left. Serena stood alone at her table for a moment, the room still full and humming around her, and she held the tears of the ocean in her right hand and felt the weight of it, and thought about Eleanor Hastings in 1923, and her grandmother in 1961, and her mother and now herself, and the long, unbroken thread of women who had carried this thing through their particular difficulties with varying degrees of grace. She put the necklace in her evening bag. She clasped it closed. She stood with perfect posture in a room full of people who had watched her tonight and would remember it, and she thought about Monday morning, Jonathan filing Diane, calling Marcus Webb's story in the Sunday Times, the board meeting that would follow the long, careful work of reconstruction that lay ahead. None of it was over. She knew that. The evening had been the visible part, the moment, the statement, the part that would be photographed and discussed and remembered. But the work, the real work, the financial untangling, and the legal proceedings and the personal reckoning of what came after a 23-year marriage ended not with grief, but with a court filing that work had barely begun. And she was ready for it. She realized more ready than she had been for anything in years, because she had spent the last 11 days remembering something she had known at 30 and somehow needed to relearn at 51, that the thing she was best at, the thing she had always been best at, was not elegance or strategy or even composure. It was clarity. The willingness to see a situation exactly as it was and respond to it exactly as it deserved, without performance, without pretense, without waiting to be rescued or validated or told that she was right. She was Serena Hastings Sterling. She had been somebody for a very long time, and she was not done yet. She picked up her bag. She said goodnight to the 4 people remaining at her table. She walked through the room at the pace Antoine had prescribed. The pace that means you are not hurrying toward anything because everything is already coming to you. And she walked to the exit and through it and down the steps of the Metropolitan Museum of Art and into the cold, clean air of a New York October night. The car was waiting exactly where she had asked it to be. She got in. The door closed. The city moved around the car cabs and pedestrians and the long tail of headlights, and Serena leaned back against the seat and closed her eyes for exactly 30 seconds and let herself feel the full weight of the evening, everything it had cost and everything it had restored. Then she opened her eyes. She looked out the window at the city she had lived in for 30 years. Her phone was already buzzing. Jonathan. Confirmed for Monday morning, 8 a.m. Diane Ashworth. 3 board votes confirmed, 4th highly likely. Call me at 7 Monday. And 1 more from a number she didn't recognize. She opened it. It said, "You were right about everything. Thank you for letting me do the right thing. C." She stared at that message for a moment. Then she put the phone back in her bag and looked out the window again. The city moved. The lights ran past. The night held everything it always held. The noise and the cold and the 10,000 separate lives going on simultaneously in every direction. And Serena Sterling rode through the middle of it and felt for the first time in 11 days something that was not strategy and not composure and not clarity. Something that was simply peace, the particular peace that arrives not when everything is resolved, but when you have finally stopped running from what is true and started walking toward it instead. She held that feeling for the length of the drive home. She let it be exactly what it was. And when the car stopped at Central Park West and the driver opened the door and the cold night air came in, she stepped out of it and into whatever came next, and she was ready. She slept 6 hours. Not the restless surface sleep of someone whose mind won't stop moving, but real sleep, the kind that comes after something has finally been resolved at a level deep enough to allow the body to actually rest. She woke at 5:40 Sunday morning and lay still for a moment in the dark, aware before she was fully conscious that something had shifted. Not in the apartment, in herself. Some fundamental recalibration that had happened while she wasn't paying attention. Sometime between midnight and now, that had moved her from the tightly wound precision of the last 11 days into something quieter and more permanent. She got up, she made coffee, she sat at her desk. Her phone had 47 notifications. She went through them methodically, the way she went through everything, not quickly, not with the skimming attention of someone trying to get to the end, but thoroughly because thoroughness was the habit of a lifetime, and she had never found a reason to abandon it. Marcus Webb's story had gone live at midnight, the Times digital edition. The headline was direct and without drama. Sterling Technologies under federal scrutiny as financial irregularities surface. The subheading mentioned the Hastings Trust. The 3rd paragraph mentioned the Crescent Moon Ball. The 7th paragraph quoted without attribution someone described as a longtime member of the New York financial community who said that Serena Hastings Sterling had been aware of the discrepancies for nearly 2 weeks and had taken immediate and appropriate action to protect the family trust's interests. She read the whole thing. It was accurate. It was careful. It was the kind of journalism that did not editorialize because it didn't need to. The facts laid out clearly in Marcus Webb's precise, unadorned prose were sufficient. She set the phone down. She drank her coffee. She thought about Richard waking up this morning somewhere. She didn't know where. She realized she genuinely did not know which hotel or which friend's apartment he had gone to after leaving the gala and opening his phone and finding this story waiting for him like a door that has been locked from the inside. Her phone rang at 6:15. She looked at the screen. Richard. She let it ring 3 times. Then she answered. "I've seen the Times," he said. His voice was different from last night. The performance was entirely gone, not just the composure, but the controlled anger, the managed defensive, all of it. What was left was simply a voice, tired, stripped down, the voice of someone who has been awake since before dawn with nothing to do but think. "Good morning, Richard," she said. "You gave him the documents." Diane Ashworth briefed him. "With my knowledge and Jonathan's authorization, yes." A silence. "Serena?" He stopped, started again. "I need you to understand something." "Richard, please." The word came out with a rawness that surprised her. Not because she hadn't known he was capable of it, but because she hadn't heard it from him in so long she had almost stopped believing it was still in him. "Please, just let me say this." She waited. "I knew it was wrong," he said. "The money, the accounts. I knew it when I was doing it. I told myself the story that people tell themselves, that it was complicated, that the marriage was already over in every way that mattered, that I was just preparing for an inevitable outcome. But I knew it was wrong." A pause. "I need you to know that I knew." Serena was quiet for a moment. Outside, the city was still mostly dark and mostly quiet, that particular Sunday morning stillness that belongs only to cities that know how to rest between their own excesses. "Why does it matter to you that I know that?" she asked. He was silent for a long time, long enough that she almost said his name again. "Because you're the only person whose opinion of me has ever actually mattered," he said. "And I have spent 4 years acting in a way that doesn't deserve a good one." She held the phone and felt the weight of those words, not their sentiment, which she recognized and filed away, in the complicated space where love and its aftermath coexist without resolution, but their timing. The specific timing of a man who had run out of every other option and had arrived finally at honesty. Not because he had chosen honesty, because nothing else was left. "Jonathan will call your attorney at 9 Monday morning," she said. "What happens after that depends on the choices you make between now and then. Cooperation will be noted. Resistance will be countered." She paused. "I'm not interested in punishing you beyond what is legally and financially necessary, Richard. I never was. But I am going to take back everything that is mine, every account, every asset that belongs to the Hastings Trust, full governance of the foundation, and the penthouse." A long silence. "The penthouse," he said. "It was purchased with Hastings Capital. The documentation is clear. Jonathan has it." Another silence, then very quietly, All right, she said. "Serena." His voice had gone to its lowest register, the place it went when he was most himself underneath everything else. "I'm sorry. I know it doesn't fix anything, but I am." She looked out the window at the lightening sky. She thought about 23 years, about the first time she had met him, a tech conference 2001. He had been 31 and brilliant and genuinely funny in a way that had surprised her, because brilliant men so rarely bothered to be funny. She thought about their wedding, which had been small because she had never wanted a large one. She thought about their children, both grown now, both living their own lives in other cities, both unaware as of yet of what this week had contained, both going to need a phone call from her today. "I know you are," she said. "I believe you." A pause. "It doesn't change what has to happen, but I believe you." She hung up. She sat with the phone in her hand for a moment. Then she set it down and picked up her coffee and finished it, and she felt the full, ordinary weight of a Sunday morning, the kind that exists after everything has changed and the world has not yet caught up to the change. At 7:15, Diane Ashworth called. "The 4th vote is confirmed," she said before Serena could say anything. "And I've spoken to 2 members of the executive team at Sterling. The COO, David Park, he's been aware for some time that something was wrong in the subsidiary accounts. He didn't know what, but he knew the numbers didn't reconcile the way they should have. He's prepared to cooperate fully with any formal review." Serena straightened slightly. "David Park came forward on his own. He called me at 6 this morning, said he'd been following the news since midnight, and that he'd been waiting for someone to ask the right questions for 8 months. Diane paused. "He's a good man. He built that company alongside Richard from the beginning. He's angry." "He should be," Serena said. "He wants to know if there's a path where the company survives this intact, where the 400 employees don't pay for what one person did." "Tell him yes," Serena said. "Tell him that is specifically and entirely my intention. And tell him I'd like to meet with him Tuesday morning." "I'll tell him." a beat. Serena, one more thing. The SEC made a preliminary inquiry call to Sterling's legal department at 8 o'clock this morning, Sunday morning, which means they were already moving before Marcus's story ran. Serena absorbed this. They had their own information. It appears so, which means someone inside the financial structure had already flagged the transactions through a separate channel. The story didn't create the investigation. It confirmed one that was already beginning. She thought about that, about Richard, who had believed for 4 years that what he had built was invisible, that the structure of it was clever enough, layered enough that it would hold. About the specific hubris of a man who trusts his own construction so completely that he stops checking whether other people can see through it. "All right," she said. "Let Jonathan know before 9. He'll want to coordinate with the Trust's response to any federal inquiry." "Already done," Diane said. "I called him at 6:30. Of course she had. "Thank you, Diane, for all of it." "Don't thank me yet," Diane said with the dry precision of a woman who has been in enough difficult situations to know that gratitude is better placed at the end than the middle. "Thank me when the board meeting is done and the management structure is stabilized and the company is still standing." "Then I'll thank you then," Serena said. She hung up. She stood. She went to the window and looked at the city, which was now fully light. The gold of it, the particular Sunday morning gold that made everything look simultaneously real and temporary, and she thought about Tuesday. About David Park and the 412 employees of Sterling Technologies who had come to work every day in a building whose foundation had been quietly undermined by the man at the top. She thought about what she was going to build next. Not immediately. There was still the legal process, the financial reconstruction, the long, careful work of untangling 4 years of deliberate complexity. But past that, past the necessary machinery of undoing what Richard had done, she thought about what she actually wanted, what Serena Hastings Sterling at 51, having survived this specific kind of devastation with her clarity and her resources and her values intact, actually intended to do with the next 20 years. The answer came to her the way answers sometimes do not, as a decision, but as a recognition, something she had already known and simply hadn't said yet. She was going to rebuild the Hastings Foundation. The original one, the one her grandfather had established in 1952, and that had been folded into Richard's corporate structure during the marriage and had quietly lost its independence. She was going to reconstitute it as a standalone entity, fully Hastings-governed, focused on the things her family had always cared about. Education specifically, and the particular kind of education that opens doors for people who were born in front of closed ones. She was going to do it properly, with the full weight of the Trust's capital and the full authority of the Hastings name. And she was going to do it in a way that would last past her, that would be the kind of thing her daughter might one day be part of, and her daughter's daughter after that. The kind of thing that made the tears of the ocean meaningful beyond its sapphires and its platinum. The kind of thing that justified calling something a legacy. She was still standing at the window when her phone rang again. She looked at the screen. Her daughter, Catherine, 26 years old, living in Boston, working at a hospital, the kind of person who called when she sensed that something had happened, even when no one had told her anything. Serena answered immediately. "Katie?" "Mom?" Catherine's voice had the specific quality of someone who has been awake for a while working up to a phone call. "I've been reading the Times since 6 a.m., and I need you to tell me everything." Serena almost laughed. "How much have you read?" "Everything that's online, which clearly isn't everything." A pause. "Are you okay?" "I am," Serena said. "I genuinely am." "Dad, your father and I spoke this morning. He's all right. He's dealing with the consequences of decisions he made, which is as it should be, and none of what happens between us changes anything about your relationship with him. I want to be very clear about that." Catherine was quiet for a moment. "Mom, you went to the Crescent Moon Ball alone and gave a speech about the necklace, and apparently Beatrice's assistant posted something on Instagram at 11 p.m. last night that I've been trying to decode for 4 hours." This time, Serena did laugh. It surprised her, the ease of it, the realness of it, the way it came up from somewhere that had been very tightly held for 11 days and was now suddenly loose. "What did Beatrice post?" A photo of the two of you from the gala. You're standing next to each other, and you're both looking at the camera, and the caption just says, "We have always known how to stand." Serena closed her eyes for a second. Beatrice, 73 years old and posting on Instagram at 11 o'clock on a Saturday night. "That's Beatrice," she said. "Mom." Catherine's voice had softened. "Seriously, are you okay? Like, actually okay? Not the kind of okay you say when you don't want me to worry." Serena thought about how to answer that. She thought about the 11 days, the documents, the gown, the phone call from a 24-year-old, the moment at the microphone, Richard's face across the table, the necklace being placed in her hand, the long car ride home. She thought about the 6 hours of real sleep and the coffee and the Sunday morning light on the city. "I'm the best kind of okay," she said, "the kind that cost something." A long pause. Then Catherine said very quietly, "I'm coming home next weekend." "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to. I want to." A beat. "And I want to see the gown. Beatrice's Instagram only showed you from the shoulders up." Serena smiled. "Antoine will want to hear that. He spent 4 days on the train." "Tell him it was worth it." Another pause. "I love you, Mom." "I love you too, Katie." She hung up. She stood with the phone in her hand and felt the specific fullness of that, her daughter's voice, the easiness of it, the trust in it, and she held it carefully, the way you hold things that matter. Monday arrived the way she had prepared for it to arrive. Jonathan filed at 8:15. By 9, Richard's attorney had called. By 9:45, a preliminary agreement to cooperate with the financial review was in place, not because Richard's attorney advised it as the best legal strategy, but because Richard himself had apparently told his attorney to cooperate. She found out later that Richard had called his attorney at 7 Sunday morning and said simply, "Whatever Serena needs, don't fight it." She found out because Jonathan told her, and Jonathan told her because he thought she deserved to know, and when he told her, she sat with it for a moment and felt the complicated thing. It was not gratitude, not vindication, something quieter than both. The recognition that the man she had married was still in some residual and possibly too late way, capable of doing the right thing when there was nothing left to protect by doing otherwise. At 10:30, the Hastings Trust Board issued a formal statement through Jonathan's office. It was 3 paragraphs long. It described the financial irregularities, the trust's immediate action to protect its assets, and Serena Hastings Sterling's role in initiating and overseeing the response. The final sentence read, "The Hastings Trust remains under the full and exclusive governance of the Hastings family, and its mission and values are unchanged." She read that sentence twice. At 11, Jonathan called her directly. "The Delaware accounts are frozen as of 30 minutes ago," he said. "The $11 million is effectively in escrow pending the court's determination. We'll get it back. The case is straightforward." "How long?" 6 to 9 months for full resolution, but the practical effect is immediate. He cannot access, move, or leverage those funds from this point forward. "And Sterling Technologies. The board is meeting Wednesday. Diane has the votes. David Park has agreed to serve as interim CEO pending a formal search, which I think is a strong choice. He knows the company, he's respected internally, and his cooperation with the investigation is going to matter significantly in how the company is perceived going forward." "It is a strong choice," she agreed. "There's one more thing." Jonathan paused. She recognized the pause, the one he used when he had information that was significant, but that he was uncertain how she would receive it. "The preliminary SEC inquiry has expanded to include 2 other accounts that weren't part of our original documentation, accounts we didn't know existed." Serena was very still. "How significant?" "Potentially another $4 million. We don't have full visibility yet. The federal investigators will lead on that piece." A beat. "I'm telling you because I want you to be prepared. The number may be larger than we thought. The full scope of what he was building is still being determined." She absorbed that. She let it sit in her chest for a moment, the specific, tireless quality of betrayal that keeps revealing new dimensions just when you think you have seen all of them. Then she said, "All right, keep me informed, and Jonathan, thank you for everything this week." "It's what I'm here for," he said. And she knew he meant it in both senses, professional and personal duty and loyalty, the 2 things he had never allowed to contradict each other in 22 years. She hung up. She went to the safe in the back of her closet. She opened it. She took out the velvet box, the one that had held the replica which Jonathan had now catalogued as evidence. She put the real necklace in the box. She held the box in both hands for a moment. Then she put it back in the safe and closed the panel and stood in the quiet of the closet and breathed. The following Tuesday morning, she met David Park in the Sterling Technologies offices on 53rd Street. She had not been in these offices for 4 years. Richard had made it clear subtly and consistently that the operational side of the company was his domain, and she had allowed that clarity without examining why she was allowing it. Walking through the lobby, she felt the specific strangeness of returning to a place that had been kept from you by someone you trusted. David Park was 53, Korean American, with the particular quality of someone who has worked very hard for a very long time and has never learned to perform humility he doesn't actually feel. He met her in the conference room on the 22nd floor. He was already there when she arrived, which she noted. He stood when she came in. "Mrs. Sterling." "David," she said. "Please sit." They both sat. He looked at her directly, which she appreciated. No preamble, no performed regret. "I need to ask you something," she said, directly. "Please do." "Did you know what he was doing?" He held her gaze. "No," he said. "I knew something was wrong. I told Diane the accounts didn't reconcile correctly for 8 months, but I didn't know what I was looking at. I didn't know it was intentional." He paused. "I should have pushed harder." "Yes," she said. "You should have." She let that sit for exactly 1 second. So should several other people. That's not the question now. The question now is what the company needs and whether you're the right person to provide it for the next 12 months while a proper search is conducted. "I want to be," he said. "This company has 400 people in it who did their jobs honestly. They deserve leadership that does the same." She looked at him. She looked at him the way she looked at people when she was deciding something, not with skepticism, but with the full attention of someone who has learned that the most important information in any situation is usually in what people don't know they're communicating. What David Park was not communicating performance, ambition, the specific desire to use this moment for himself. What he was communicating, anger at what had been done, commitment to the people underneath him, and a very practical intelligence about what the company needed. "Wednesday's board meeting will confirm the interim appointment," she said. "After that, we'll establish a formal reporting structure that includes trust oversight on the financial side, not interference in operations oversight. There's a difference." "I understand the difference," he said. "I imagine you do." She stood. He stood with her. She extended her hand. He shook it. "One more thing, David." "Yes." "The employees. Before the board meeting Wednesday, before any public statement, I want a communication from leadership to every person in this company. Not corporate language, real language, acknowledging what happened and committing to what comes next." She paused. "They deserve to hear from the people responsible for them before they read another word in the press." He nodded slowly. "I'll write it tonight," he said, "if you'd be willing to review it before it goes out." "I would," she said. She left the building. She stepped out onto 53rd Street and the city moved around her the way it always had. Loud, indifferent, inexhaustible, and she stood on the sidewalk for a moment and felt the strange, ordinary texture of a Tuesday morning after everything has changed. Her phone buzzed. A text from Catherine. "Booked my train for Friday. See you for dinner." She typed back, "Yes, I'll cook." A pause. Then Catherine sent 3 question marks. Serena almost laughed. She had not cooked in she couldn't remember. Years. "I'll have it catered," she corrected, "but I'll plate it myself." "That's more believable," Catherine replied. She put the phone in her bag. She started walking, not toward anything specific, just walking the way she sometimes needed to when she was thinking. And the thinking required movement. The city opened around her block by block, and she moved through it and thought about what came next. Not the legal proceedings, not the financial reconstruction. Those were in motion. They were being handled by people she trusted. They would proceed as they were designed to proceed. She thought about the foundation, about what she was going to build. She thought about her grandfather, who had started the original Hastings Foundation with a single endowment in 1952. and who had said at its inaugural dinner that the point of building something was not to have built it, but to keep building it. That the moment you stopped building was the moment it started to die. That legacy was not a monument, it was a practice. She had been 11 when he said that. She had not understood it then. She understood it now completely, in the particular way that you understand things that were always true, but had to wait until you were ready to receive them. She had lost 11 days to this, to Richard's betrayal, and the financial unraveling, and the legal machinery, and the gala, and the long, cold work of protecting what was hers. 11 days of her life spent in combat, necessary, worthwhile, ultimately victorious combat, but combat nonetheless. She did not intend to spend the next 11 days in it too. She intended to turn the corner. She took out her phone. She called her assistant. "Margot," she said, "clear Thursday and Friday. I need 2 unscheduled days." Margot, who had been her assistant for 9 years and understood the specific gravity of that request, said simply, "Done." "Anything else?" "Yes," Serena said. "Get me the original incorporation documents for the Hastings Foundation, the 1952 ones. Jonathan has them in archive storage." A pause. "For review. For rebuilding," she said. She hung up. She walked another half block. The sun was out, October, sun thin and bright and specific, the kind that doesn't warm you but illuminates everything with a particular clarity that warmer light cannot achieve. She felt it on her face. She kept walking. She had the necklace. She had the trust. She had the penthouse and the attorneys and the board and the cooperation of a man who had spent 4 years quietly trying to reduce her and had discovered too late that you cannot reduce someone who knows exactly what they are worth. She had her daughter coming Friday, and Beatrice a phone call away, and Jonathan watching every account, and David Park writing an honest letter to 400 people who deserved honesty. She had everything that mattered. Everything she had started with and more. Because she also had this, the specific, earned, indestructible knowledge that she had faced the worst version of a betrayal that a marriage can produce, and she had faced it clearly, and she had responded to it with precision and intelligence, and at the critical moments with something that was not just strategy, but actual grace. She was Serena Hastings Sterling. She had been somebody for a very long time, and standing on a Tuesday morning sidewalk in New York City with the sun on her face and the work ahead of her and the full and complete ownership of everything she had ever built, she understood with a certainty that required no further proof that she was not at the end of anything. She was as she had always been exactly at the beginning.